Hello and welcome to this video. I'm Marcus Hayes and it's now the day after my last video, so I've come around the garage to crack on with what I started yesterday. If you haven't seen my last video, go and check that out first, and I'll make it easier for you by leaving a link at the top of the screen now. The first thing I'm going to be doing today is fitting this pivot pin to the bell housing. Now I've actually robbed this pivot pin and washer from this cast iron bell housing that I got with this Type 9 when I bought it, because I just don't want to wait for Burton's to send me another one through the post. Now I'm going to be using this heavy duty version of Araldite this time, which apparently is a bit stronger than the other one. It takes a little bit longer to go off, but I probably won't be driving the car today anyway, so yeah, it should have plenty of time. So hopefully this will hold it in better, but I'm not holding my breath, to be honest. Good old English weather, we've now got hailstones. It was just absolutely chucking it down with rain, and I had my window open, which isn't good. So now I have soaking wet bucket seats. Right, so I've got the old flywheel off. I've got some bathroom scales here. So as you can see, it's showing 8.2 kilos. As I mentioned in my last video, I'm going to be fitting a lighter flywheel this time. This one's apparently 5.75 kilos without the ring gear. Yeah, 6 kilos, including the ring gear. So that's a 25% decrease in weight over the old one, and should help the engine rev up quicker and should improve the acceleration of the car. Now, as I said before, I got this from a company called IK Engineering, and I'll leave a link to their website in the description of this video. One thing worth mentioning about this flywheel, it's designed to be used with the standard Pinto starter motor. So if you are switching from a Pinto to a Zetec, it means you haven't got to go out and buy the LRS 707 starter motor like you would if you was using the 1800 Zetec flywheel. I'm going to be using ARP flywheel bolts this time, which are a lot safer when you're ragging the fuck out of your car every single day. I got these from Burton Power, and I'll leave a link to their website in the description of this video. Now, in the instructions, it specifies that you have to use the ARP lube under the head, and that you should use Loctite 242 thread lock on the threads. Before I fit the new flywheel, I'm going to be replacing the spigot bearing, or the pilot bearing, in the crank. Now, the way I'm going to remove the old one is by using this bolt that I've wrapped with duct tape to make it the right size to slip into the middle of the bearing, and some bread. Right, so the spigot bearing is in here, and the idea with the bread method is that you keep stuffing bread into the middle of the bearing, and it works better when it's wet apparently, so I've just run a couple of slices under the tap, and then you just keep tapping the bread in. Just keep poking it in and tapping it. Now the idea is it's going to fill up the crevice behind the bearing, and then when it's got nowhere else to go, it's going to actually start pushing the bearing out. The tape's coming off. I'm going to try this drift instead. Shit, the end of my drift is stuck in there now. Right, this time I'm trying to sock it with tape over it. Tape's breaking straight away. Oh, I found a thicker bolt, this might do it. Let's see. My memory card filled up, so you didn't actually get to see me being successful with the bread method to get the pilot bearing out. Now the reason I was struggling is because I didn't have a bolt that is exactly the same diameter as the inside of this bearing. I ended up using this threaded bar that's part of this pulley puller, and although it is hexagon at the end, which obviously leaves slight gaps for the bread to be forced back out of, it did end up creating enough pressure to force the bearing out. I've got the new bearing in there now. I just greased it up a little bit and tapped it home with a hammer and a socket. So now finally I'm ready to fit the new light flywheel. Right, so the light flywheel is now fitted. I've torqued all the bolts up to 85 foot-pounds as specified on the instructions that come with the ARP bolts. Yeah, just got to give the flywheel a quick clean with brake cleaner and then it's ready to put the clutch on. So as I mentioned in my last video, got an AP Racing friction plate and standard pressure plate, and I've got a brand new clutch release bearing to go in as well. Got these bits from BOUT Power. We're just going to hook up the clutch alignment tool and get the clutch fitted to the flywheel. Hopefully this clutch release bearing will stay in one piece a little bit longer than the last one. Right, I've got the clutch cable hooked up and the clutch fork is where it needs to be. So hopefully that will stay there while I try and put the gearbox on. But first I need to get all the other bolts in, the bell housing, and do them up tight. Hello, it's now the next morning and I'm up at stupid o'clock on my way to the garage to try and get a couple of hours in before I start work. I did actually get the gearbox fitted last night in the dark, but I didn't get it on film. I got the two bottom Allen key bolts in to hold the gearbox to the bell housing, and then I thought while I'm under there I might as well at least try and put the top two in, and the first one I tried to put in seemed to just spin once it was screwed all the way in. But I've done the bottom two Allen key bolts up really tight so it's at least secure enough to leave mounted to the car while the car's parked up. Now I'm hoping that the other Allen key bolt will thread in okay without spinning, so at least I'll be able to get the gearbox mounted on 3 out of the 4 Allen key bolts. It's not ideal, but obviously the gearbox will be coming back off in a few weeks once I get my rebuilt one back from HPE Motorsport. Because I'm having problems with the pivot pin on my bell housing, I'm actually considering buying a brand new Ali bell housing. You can get them nowadays that have already got the thread cut in them, which will mean I don't need to use the threaded inserts, and at least then I know I won't have any problems like this in the future. Anyway, that's enough chit chat for now. I need to get myself through this rush hour traffic and I'll catch up with you when I get to the garage. Right, so I've got to the garage. I'm just going to grab some tools and jump underneath and see what's what. I've just shone a torch inside the bell housing and I now know the reason for the other bolt spinning. That insert is actually missing. The pin is still there, but there's no insert. I can't seem to see the insert on the floor anywhere out here, so I'm guessing it's in the bell housing somewhere. So as you can see, this insert is missing. I felt around inside here and I've tried poking a magnet in there and I can't find it so far, so I'm just going to have to take the bell housing off. So this is the insert that came loose. What I'd recommend, if you're going to fit these to your bell housing, get these tapped and then you can just use a countersunk bolt going from this way so that it's flush once it's bolted in, and then there's no way that the inserts will come out. I'm just going to put the bell housing back on and see if I can get the gearbox fitted before I go to work. I'm going to be late for work anyway. Come out again, man. Come out again, man. Right, so got the box all mounted back in the car. Obviously only on 3 out of the 4 Allen key bolts. Still need to bolt the prop back onto the diff. But I need to get myself to work now. I'm really late. I phoned them up and told them I had a domestic issue, which is kind of true. Hello, it's now the next day. I woke up feeling really ill this morning. Got a bit of a cold, but my whole body aches as well, so I think I might have the flu. Laying on my back in the cold, lifting the gearbox in and out of the car probably hasn't helped. Maybe I'm getting old. I've got a couple of days off work and I probably should be at home resting, but I need to get my dad's car back to him at the weekend, so I need to get my car back on the road. After the last clip you saw yesterday, I bolted the starter motor on and just tried to start the engine. I had to use the Pinto starter that was fitted to the Mark 1. My new flywheel on the Mark 2 needs a Pinto starter. So I took the starter off the Mark 1, bolted it to the Mark 2, went to start it, and all I'm getting is a grinding noise, as if the pinion from the starter motor isn't meshing with the ring gear on the flywheel properly. Kat's given me a lift to the garage today. We're not too far away from the garage now, so I'll catch up with you when we get there. This is the high torque Pinto starter that I borrowed off the Mark 1. The first thing I'm going to do is test it while it's off the car to make sure that the pinion comes out as it's supposed to and that it spins. Right, so the way I'm going to test this starter motor, this is the main terminal, which is connected to the battery positive with the thick wire. Just going to use jump leads to connect that to the positive side of this battery. Now this would be earthed out by the body being attached to the bell housing. Just attach that to the body and then attach this to the negative side of the battery. And then to trigger the starter motor to actually come on, I need to apply power to this terminal here. So I'm going to put my foot on the starter motor. I've got this wire that I'll just put an end on. Plug that into there and then just touch this on this jump lead. Right, so that all looks like it's working fine. So now I'm going to bolt the starter motor back on the car and then I'm going to look through the back of the bell housing to see what's going on while Kat turns the engine over. Now, I changed the pinion gear on that starter motor a few months ago and I hadn't used it since then. And then yesterday, when it was making a grinding sound, I thought I might have actually put the pinion gear on the wrong way round. So last night I took the starter apart again and it was clear that it was actually on the right way round. Right, I ended up using the GoPro to film what's going on inside the bell housing. And I can see that the pinion for the starter motor, it's engaging with the ring gear on the flywheel and then it's sort of bouncing back rather than staying engaged. I've actually ordered a new starter motor today anyway because I plan to use that starter motor on the Mark 1. I think I'll have to send that high torque starter away and let someone who knows what they're doing have a look at it. It's quite an expensive starter and as I've said in the previous video, my dad bought it for me as a present, so I do want to try and get it working and use it on the Mark 1. I'm going to pack up now and go home, but I'll catch back up with you when I've had my new starter delivered. Hello, so another couple of days have passed and I'm back round the garage again. I'm still feeling like absolute shit, but I'm not quite as bad as I was the other day. Had the new starter motor delivered yesterday, so hopefully today's the day I'll be able to get Maude back on the road. I got this starter motor from a company called Andy's Auto Parts in Oldham for a really good price. In fact, it was so cheap that I assumed it was going to be a recon unit, but as you can see, it's brand new. The part number for this starter is LRS110 and it's basically a Pinto starter. They also sell the LRS707 starter that you need if you're running an 1800 Zetec flywheel. I'll leave a link to Andy's Auto Parts website in the description of this video. Without further ado, I'm going to get the power light starter off the car and bolt this one on. Right, so I've got the new starter on. The engine actually starts now, but it still seems a bit too loud to me. I've double checked the number of teeth on the ring gear that's attached to the flywheel using a photograph that I took of the flywheel when I bought it, and I know that's all fine, so I don't know what's going on, but it does start the engine, so maybe I'm worrying about nothing. What I'm going to do now is bolt the prop shaft back onto the diff, adjust the clutch cable and take it for a rip round the block because it's been too long. Right, so I've just got back indoors after having a bit of a shakedown run in the Mark II and the car seemed to run alright. The engine definitely seems a bit more responsive, it revs up freer and the power band seems to have been pushed further up the rev range, which is to be expected with a lighter flywheel. I'm not sure if that means potentially my carb jetting and my ignition map may need adjusting, but I'm going to get in touch with my tuner and see what he reckons. I noticed a bit of a whining coming from the gearbox, but that's no surprise when you consider that I ran the car for a few days without the bolts done up tight enough that hold the gearbox to the bell housing. The reason I probably didn't notice the noise before is because of the vibrating noise coming from the broken clutch release bearing. The first gear of the Type 9 seems even more pathetically short than normal due to the light flywheel making the engine rev up quicker, but that'll be rectified when I get my rebuilt gearbox back from HPE Motorsport with the longer first gear kit installed. One thing I noticed when I fitted the starter motor is that it fouls on the exhaust manifold. It's not enough to stop you bolting it up properly, but it is leaning against it, and I'm sure the heat isn't going to do it any good in the long run. It's actually leaning up against the really lumpy weld on the exhaust manifold, so I'm going to grind that back a little bit, and I'm going to grind away part of the starter motor casing as well,
just to give me a little bit of clearance. When I put the car away just now, I removed the starter motor so that I can get cracking on with that job the next time I'm around the garage, and notice that the crank sensor is actually rubbing against the back of the flywheel. It's not a big issue though, I'll just space the crank sensor away from it with a washer. Anyway, I'm going to leave this video here. If you did enjoy it, please do give it a thumbs up and a share. And if you haven't already done so, please do consider subscribing to the channel to be kept right up to date with future uploads. Feel free to check out my Facebook and my Instagram, and I'll leave the links you need for that in the description of this video. Until next time, thanks for watching.